All right, so we will start off with a Q&A session. Most of the times, we believe doing good is the path, or desiring bad thoughts and eliminating potential harm or hurt towards others or oneself is the teaching. However, equanimity is the path um, eventually brings balance and wisdom. Your comments, Bante, on the above matter. All right. You see, by this spiritual path, here let us talk on the very a wider concept, about how our path develops. Usually, most of the time, when I talk about development on the path, and usually it's development on the meditation path, and then from nothing you have, and then you gain all the insight, and then the enlightenment takes place. Normally, I talk about that path, and it's quite clear those paths. But when you talk about a wider, like everyday life thing, those part also is a bit more complicated, but nevertheless, it follows actually the development of the meditation. It follows the development of the meditation. You see, when we begin to do a lot of good from the beginning, let's say maybe 20, 30 years ago, maybe since young, when for this one, sometimes if we are young, from young, we don't see much of the changes in our life, because we kind of like brought up from it in that sense, But in the middle of your life, and you change from a bad person, immoral person, into a moral person, into a more straight and more sincere person, then you can see the contrast is there. But if you're brought up from young, after all, you are walking on the right path or wholesome path, you may not see it that much. But for those who are in the middle of their life, they change from a very immoral to moral. Then you'll see that how your mentality can actually able to develop. You see, when we begin to do a lot of good deeds, and usually when we begin to do a lot of good deeds, is one of the major thing is our dana, our generosity. And we begin to do this dana here, dana there, and then we give time to listen to talks and listen to the more right view. And then we begin to also, at the same time, all the unwholesome things we begin to reduce. Maybe sometimes we reduce it quite slowly, but nevertheless, we begin to reduce those things, which is good, because sometimes human beings, what the people that I've met also, sometimes they can be very charitable, but their other actions can be still immoral. They still want to lie in their business. They want to cheat others in their business, in that sense. But on the other hand, they can be quite generous because they find that the generosity gives them happiness. But they don't realize that all these unwholesome things that they are done or doing or still doing will give them unhappiness in the future. But nevertheless, they learn. So a number of us may be developing a lot of wholesome good deeds, a lot of dana that we perform, and then we also to have gratitude, listen to the Dhamma, sharing merits, and then also on the other hand, we also begin to prevent ourselves from doing a lot of harm, from killing, from stealing, from cheating, and so on. We begin to more on a more proper path. Even for some people, like they begin to give up on smoking. The addiction, a certain addiction to wine, certain addiction to beer and intoxicants, they begin to give up on those things too, which is good actually, which is wonderful. So when they do that, they find that they have more joy in their life. They have more joy in their life overall. That is also good. They have more wholesome type of joy in their life. And then, of course, around during this time also, I mean, emotions and our bias and so on are not fully able to remove yet. We still get a lot of attachment. Once we attachment, there's always bias, and our emotion will flow, and our anger or our happiness will flow according to that emotion, according to the feelings, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. So while we are doing good, our mind is still not so stable. We still delight in here and there, although we know that generosity is good, although we know that the sila is good, but we still enjoy a lot of things. So there is a bias also. The mind is still biased here and biased there. Just like a lot of you, when you don't meditate, when you don't develop the mind, there's still be a lot of bias, although you do a lot of good deeds, although you try to prevent yourself from this one. But when it comes into development of meditation, this is where the deeper aspect of the mind will start to take place. A more deeper sense of mindfulness, a more deeper sense of wisdom, concentration will begin to take root. Now, when it takes root, this is where it starts going to change the further aspect of your life. And this more of towards the internal aspect. Now, here is that when it change, it begins to change your biases, your biasness towards happiness or towards pleasant or unpleasant or sadness. You become much more steadier. Sometimes, for example, I've met with people that before that, let's say, when somebody died, their loved one died, passed away, and then they will cry and cry and cry, very sad, so sad, maybe cry for 1 week. Even their dog died, also they cry for 1 or 2 weeks. Even somebody else died, also they cried. Even though they watch the movies, somebody died, and also they cry. Even though it's just a movie, but they cry also. So, because of the bias of the mind bias into it, and it goes into it, it attached to all these things, and our mind get sadness or get angry in that sense. Then when they begin to meditate over time, when their loved one pass away, now this time their biases is not so much anymore. The mind doesn't tilt to it so much. Yes, they still get sad, but they are not sad until like 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 year, 2 years, and so on. The sadness keep on lingering in their heart because they're missing the person. So it doesn't linger anymore. So you may be like, oh, the person passed away, maybe just a week. Okay, no more. After that, they move on with their life. When they think about the person, the tears doesn't keep on flowing. That means that the mind is much more balanced. Although it is still there, but the balance is getting better. The equanimity is getting better. That means the fluctuation of the mind, it's getting less. Yeah. Then also on the other another example is that connected to something that you are happy and you are very pleasant and you are very happy. In the past, when things are happy, when it's pleasant, you get very attached to it. You get very attached to them, or the people, or the things, or your beautiful things, and so on. You kind of like you will try to find ways to make yourself happy, to make others happy. For example, maybe come the Chinese New Year and so on. You want to celebrate, you want to do a lot of celebration, you want to visit this one, visit that one, because these things give you happiness. Yeah. Or when you watch a movie, when you watch the movie and then you can glued to it, For example, some of you may be watching all this Korean drama. You kind of like glued to it, Those days we cannot get all this download from Netflix or from whatever, You don't. Those days and 20, 30 years ago, you have to wait for the time. Maybe at 6 o'clock, then only all the Cantonese movie, the Cantonese series will start. Then you kind of like wait for it. What's going to happen? Because of the attachment, because it gives you kind of like a joy, excitement there. But when after you meditate now, all these type of movies and those things that bombarding your senses on, then it becomes less. It becomes less like if I watch finish, I don't watch finish, maybe also doesn't matter. Or if you hear something like a nice music and then the music suddenly goes off, it says, okay, no problem. Or when there is a movie that you're watching, I mean, you don't, whether you finish the movie, doesn't finish the movie also doesn't matter. You can stop and then, never mind, tomorrow we can continue. Yeah. Then after that, tomorrow you want to continue, then you watch a bit, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, sian already, then okay, off. You don't have that desire, that full desire that you want to finish the movie or you want to finish that, the impact of the mind want to finish everything, to have that gratification. That means the mind is not so biased towards the attachment and not so biased towards the unhappiness of life, sadness or anger and so on. The mind is more towards the center. Yeah. As you meditate further and further, the mind comes into a more middle path. And that middle path, some of us may think that no entertainment, no this, no that, no song, where got fun in it. But that is another level of happiness altogether, where when you don't meditate, when you don't practice, when you don't develop, you don't see that as a happiness. You only see what the happiness is in front of you only. You do not know, you haven't seen a higher happiness yet. And only when you begin to develop further, then the mind, the equanimity of the mind becomes much more clearer. When you have that equanimity and so on, doesn't mean that you cannot laugh and you cannot do this and cannot do that. You're totally like a topakong, you sit there and then you do not do anything, like a statue. Not that, You can still able to function, and yet you are quite flexible in doing things, but you are not affected with all the happiness, all the pleasantness and all the unpleasantness of life. You can navigate through life much more smooth, much more clearer, much more wiser in that sense. Not so much affected with all kinds of life and this and that. So this is how, when we develop our so when we develop, it will begin to bring in balance and wisdom. in that sense. So too, when we develop vipassana insight also. You see, when the deep vipassana insights, and also when you develop the samatha practice also. In the beginning of the development of samatha practice, there's some joy and happiness there. As you go into a higher jhana, then it becomes equanimity and concentration. So too, the path also is parallel in the vipassana path. Now, in the beginning path, of course, although you see a lot of pain here and there, but also in a certain part, you also have some degree of pleasantness, joy, and so on. But when you go into a deeper insight, further insight, and especially when it comes into the knowledge of equanimity of formation, sankara upekanyana, then again it's equanimity also. And then when you further goes into path and fruition, enlightenment, and so on, then it comes with a lot of equanimity. I mean that equanimity, it comes with deep and strong wisdom, penetrative type of wisdom, not just worldly wisdom, but it's a very spiritual, supramundane type of wisdom. So this is our development. So whether you are fast or slow, as long as you keep on moving, then you will reach the end. Maybe this life, next life, future life, what can we do? After all, if those who are slow, then we have to keep going. If those who are fast, then also you keep going. So this is what it means here. So as we develop our development, now our mind becomes much more this one. But don't get attached to even to the equanimity also, or the wisdom, because sometimes we also met once in a while this one, and then sometimes they thought that they meditate a lot already. They thought that they're holy already, very wise already, or they thought that they are already like enlightened already. All right. So as I said now, you have to be careful with this equanimity also. Although it's deep and it's this one, and also the craving also can attach to it. Now the craving here, you got to be careful, because I've met or I've seen, I heard now that people thought that they became enlightened already, although they are not enlightened yet. They thought that, or they thought that they have this jhana or that jhana already. Then after that, they act, they talk with a lot of equanimity, one know. Then they walk as if like they are arahant already. They walk slowly. They don't look at people. They sit down, and then talking also one kind, very soft, very gentle, and then they don't look here, look there. They are very, very soft, very, very straight. They walk, and then everybody look at them. Wow, holy! All this one must be arahant already. I've met with this one before, because they begin to attach to all those things without their realizing. Just like the question number one, this one is even in the deeper aspect of attachment. They're not there yet, then they already think that they are already in the path. They're on the trip, not on the right path. So there are people like that. There are monks or nuns or even devotees like that. Even devotees that they thought that they develop further, then they talk to you, They talk to me, they talk to me. They don't use the word I, They use the word 5 aggregates. Bante, when this 5 aggregate is meditating, when the noticing of the rising and falling, this 5 aggregate, they don't use the word I. They use the word 5 aggregate, because they thought that, we could go deeper already. We cannot use the word I anymore. They are all on the trip. They get attached to all their development and so on. So be careful. The further, even that you go into the deeper aspect of spirituality, don't think that the craving is far away. It's just next to you. And even like, for example, like Anuruddha, Venerable Anuruddha. Venerable Anuruddha, he's the chief in the divine power, in the divine eye, sorry, in the divine eye. And also he is also the the most skillful one in the four foundation of mindfulness, according to the Buddha. But before he became arahant, not before he get fully enlightened as an arahant, while he was a Nagami, he thought that he spoke to Venerable Sariputta. He spoke to Venerable Sariputta. He says, I am the Buddha already. I am so great in my divine eye, and I can see the multitudes of heaven and so on and so forth. But how come I still cannot get enlightened yet? I can fully enlighten. Still, I cannot get the arahantship yet. Then the Venerable Sariputta, it is because you get attached to all your divine power, divine eye, to all your spiritual power. It is because you get attached to it. Because of that attachment, you get conceited about it. That's why you cannot attain the highest liberation. Then once he realized it, then he let go of that. This one, then only he can gain a full liberation. Then only Venerable Anuruddha became an arahant. So too, you see, all this wholesome path that we develop. So as much as we develop, whether the question number one or number two, we don't get attached to it. We develop as far as we can, and then every now and then we use our wise consideration, wise reflection, your yoniso manasikara, with more acceptance, we take note of our conceit and so on. We are more grounded, and then your spiritual path has less hindrance, less blocks. Then you can able to go further.